At 3:10 on the afternoon of the 31st of May, 18, Pennsylvania gave way. Behind it stood a private mountain lake, roughly 20 million tons of water, held back for the summer pleasure of some of the richest men in America. It came down the valley as a wall of water, 35 to 40 feet high, moving near 40 miles an hour. It carried houses, trees, boxcars, and locomotives ahead of it. 57 minutes after the dam broke, it reached the town of Johnstown. Much of the town was gone in about 10 minutes. And then the strangest cruelty of the day. Wreckage piled against a great stone railroad bridge below the town, a mound of debris 30 acres wide, and it caught fire, and it burned with people still trapped alive inside it. When the official count was finally closed, the dead numbered in the thousands. No one was ever held responsible. This is how it happened. Rewind 50 years. Between 1838 and 1853, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania built the dam itself as a water supply reservoir for a canal, a giant wall of packed earth and rock holding back a lake in the hills above the Little Conemaugh River. It was an earth-filled dam, more than 900 feet long and about 72 feet high. At the time it was built, it was the largest structure of its kind in the country. But the canal age was already dying. By 1857, the system was obsolete, and the whole works was sold off to the Pennsylvania Railroad. Then, in 1862, the dam partially failed. The reservoir emptied out, the railroad patched the breach, but it never rebuilt the dam back to its full original height. For years, the lake sat low and half forgotten, a broken thing in the mountains, waiting for an owner who wanted the water back. That owner arrived in 1879. A group of Pittsburgh businessmen bought the site and incorporated the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, an exclusive private retreat. By 1889, the club had about 61 members, and this was no ordinary membership. On the rolls were Henry Clay Frick, coke and steel baron; Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate; Andrew Mellon, the banker; Philander Knox, a lawyer who would one day serve as United States Attorney General and Secretary of State. 14 miles up the valley from a working steel town of some 30,000 people, these men rebuilt the lake into a summer resort. They stocked it with fish, put boats and a clubhouse on its shore, and called the reservoir Lake Conemaugh. The lake was enormous. It ran roughly 2 miles long and about a mile wide, spread across some 450 acres, and reached 60 to 70 feet deep. A man named William Boyer served as superintendent of the lake and grounds. From the porch of the clubhouse, it looked like a jewel set in the mountains. What it actually was a suspended flood, 14 miles above people's heads. The founder and organizer who drove the reconstruction was a man named Benjamin Ruff. He was not an engineer, and the way he chose to rebuild the dam is the heart of everything that followed. To rebuild the broken dam on a budget, the club made 3 decisions. Each one seemed small. Together they were fatal. First, they lowered the crest of the dam to widen it into a carriage road across the top, so members could drive across in comfort. Lowering the crest reduced the freeboard, the safety margin between the water and the top. Second, and worst of all, the original cast iron discharge pipes were gone. Those outlet pipes were the controls, the drain, the one way to lower the level of the lake in an emergency. The club never replaced them. Once the lake was full, it could not be let down. Third, to keep their expensive fish from escaping downstream, they stretched screens across the spillway, the one channel meant to carry off overflow, so the finished dam could no longer be drained, and it could no longer safely pass a flood. It could only fill. The danger was not a secret. It was written down. In 1880, an engineer named John Fulton from the Cambria Iron Company down in Johnstown went up and inspected the rebuilt dam. His verdict was blunt. The dam was unsafe, the construction was poor, the leaks were being patched with mud and straw, and there was no way to control the water. He put it on paper. The concern went higher too. Daniel Morell, the head of Cambria Iron, had pressed worries about that dam before his death in 1885. The club read the warnings and dismissed them. Down in the valley, people got used to a grim local joke that someday the dam might go. But year after year, it didn't. The lake held. The fear went quiet. That quiet was the most dangerous thing of all. Night of the 30th of May, 1889, the sky opened. A vast, sustained rainstorm settled over the region, one of the wettest on record for that part of Pennsylvania. It fell on the mountains all night. Every creek and gully fed the Little Conemaugh, and the Little Conemaugh fed the lake. Overnight, Lake Conemaugh rose more than 2 feet. By the morning of the 31st, the water was climbing toward the top of the dam. The one working spillway, the single channel meant to carry off the overflow, was clogging with branches and storm debris, choked further by the fish screens the club had installed to keep their stock from escaping. The more the water rose, the more the screens jammed. The dam's only relief valve was strangling itself shut, exactly when it was needed most. The lake that could not be drained was filling faster than anyone had ever seen, and there was nothing to open, no valve to turn, no pipe to pull. There was only the earthen wall and the water rising against it. They did try. That morning, the club's president, Colonel Elias Unger, who lived at the lake, put every man he could find to work. They piled earth on the crest, trying to raise it faster than the water climbed. They tried to cut a new emergency spillway into the hillside at the far end. They clawed by hand at the debris jamming the fish screens, trying to open the one channel that could carry water away. And a young club engineer, John Park, rode a horse hard down to the village of South Fork to send telegraph warnings to the towns below. Word did go down the line, but the valley had heard the dam is going too many times before. The warnings were doubted. The men on the crest kept shoveling earth into a lake that no longer had any exit. By early afternoon, the water was running over the top. At about 10 minutes past 3 in the afternoon, the water flowing over the crest began to cut the earthen dam apart. Once it started, it could not be stopped. The whole lake let go. Roughly 20 million tons of water emptied in about 40 minutes, funneling into the narrow valley of the Little Conemaugh. What came down was not a flood in any ordinary sense. It was a moving wall, 35 to 40 feet high, running near 40 miles an hour, and it grew as it ran. It struck Mineral Point. It struck East Conemaugh, where it swept up railroad cars and heavy locomotives as if they were toys. It struck Woodvale and erased it almost entirely. Every town it hit added its houses, its trees, its trains, and its dead to the front of the wave. There was no warning that could outrun it. It covered the 14 miles from the dam to the town in under an hour, and it grew the whole way. By the time it neared Johnstown, it was not water anymore. It was a churning mountain of wreckage, several stories tall, pushing everything the valley had in front of it. At about 7 minutes past 4, 57 minutes after the dam broke, the wave reached Johnstown itself. Much of the town was destroyed in roughly 10 minutes. In the end, some 4 square miles of the valley were completely wiped out, and about 1,600 homes were gone. The property damage would come to about $17 million in the money of 1889. People who lived through it described a mist, a rolling dark cloud ahead of the water, and a roar you felt in your chest before you saw the wall. Whole streets of houses turned in the current like driftwood. Families were separated in a single instant, and some were never reunited. When it was over, 124 women had been left widows, and 198 men had lost their wives. Then the wreckage of an entire valley slammed into the massive stone railroad bridge below the town. The bridge held, the debris backed up against it into a single jammed pile, about 30 acres across and as much as 70 feet high, with the living tangled in it alongside the dead. And the pile caught fire, oil from the wrecked trains, stoves, coals, all of it inside a mound of splintered wood. It burned, and it burned for days. At least 80 people who had survived the water died in that fire, trapped in the debris where rescuers could not reach them. The 5th of June, Clara Barton arrived with the American Red Cross. It was the organization's first major peacetime disaster relief operation. She stayed for months, running shelter and supplies for the survivors. In many ways, the modern Red Cross was made in the ruins of Johnstown. Money came in from across the United States and from 18 foreign countries. The relief funds raised came to $3,742,818.78. There was no justice to be had. Survivors sued the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. They argued what was plainly true, that the club had lowered the dam, torn out its drainage, and screened its spillway. Every lawsuit failed. The courts ruled the disaster an act of God, an unforeseeable event for which no man could be blamed. Not the club, not a single member, not Ruff, not Frick, not Carnegie. They kept their fortunes. No one ever paid. The outrage at that verdict did leave one mark on the law. It helped push American courts towards strict liability. The idea that if you keep something dangerous on your land and it gets loose, you answer for it, act of God or not. Johnstown rebuilt, and it would flood again in 1936 and again in 1977. But nothing ever matched the day the club's lake came down the mountain. More than 750 of the dead were never identified and lie together in a plot of the unknown. 99 entire families were wiped out, among them 396 children. The National Park Service says the true toll was likely well over 3,000, but the official count, closed some 14 months after the water came down, number carved into the record of the worst day in that valley's history, was 2,000.